How you doing, folks? Final Fantasy 15 was at E3 this year in full force, and they showed a couple interesting pieces of the game. I'll basically be reviewing and doing some analysis of the gameplay shown, and giving my opinion on what works and what doesn't from the game. I'll just be looking at gameplay from the trailer, the stage presentation, and the footage from a couple different versions of the playable Trial of Titan demo. The first thing that should be cleared up is that not every Trial of Titan demo shown is from the same build. The first version from the Microsoft press conference is about 3 to 4 minutes long, while it's usually like 10 to 15 minutes in length, and locking on uses different buttons from the version in the booth. This demo has been getting made fun of, but I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. Noctis does take a bit of a beating in some places, but it seems like mistakes that the average player would make when they're new at the game. I understand not all the features were shown off as best as it could have been done, but we got to see some aerial combat and the enemies were pretty interactive. The director explained that the press conference demo used was an earlier build of Trial of Titan, so the versions used in the following streams probably better represents what they want us to play, so I won't be looking at the press conference footage as much. Anyway, aerial combat looks more maneuverable and easier to use. Aerial combat was in the Platinum demo, but it wasn't very intuitive and I wasn't very good at it. I felt like the controls wouldn't let me warp where I wanted to. It sounds like this system has in fact been improved based on what the people who have played it are saying. I like the idea of aerial combat. It changes up the encounters nicely, you can dodge around faster, the animations and sound effects are great, and it seems like something that has a high skill ceiling for mastery because you have to make sure not to get knocked down, warp into position, and manage your MP. It's balanced out nicely by spending MP on warps, and I can't tell if MP drains while floating and attacking, but by attacking with certain weapons, MP can be regained, so some thought and strategy must be used in order to sustain aerial combos, which is great. The attack animations and sound effects look and sound more satisfying than in the Platinum demo. The camera is closer into Noctis so we can better see what happens, which is an improvement because the animations are cool. Noctis' motions are smooth and the wind-up on attacks are big enough that we can see what he's doing. The enemies respond appropriately to hits. There's also a stylish little flash upon impact. Each attack gives a nice sound effect as well. There are different sounds of metal scraping, which is different depending on the size of the weapon, and Noctis has a couple different grunts for the sizes of different weapons as well. The thing that could potentially lessen that satisfaction is if the response to button presses lag. Platinum demo had that problem, but the people that played the Trial of Titan demo at E3 are saying that it felt more responsive, which is a good sign for pleasant combat controls. These might sound like really minor details to be pointing out, but a big part of playing video games is pressing the buttons, and the game needs to give a satisfying amount of feedback to convey that the buttons do things. That subtle feedback makes an in-game action feel more realistic or interesting, so then controlling the game is more enjoyable. Another thing that I'm not sure is still in the combat is dodge canceling. There are times where it looks like a dodge cancel happened, but in some footage Noctis looks a little cautious for if he was able to dodge cancel. In Episode Duskai version 2.0, you could dodge cancel once your attack deals damage, or is around halfway through the animation. Here it might be the same, but I haven't really seen enough examples of using dodge canceling to tell. In most of the footage, the attack animations are at least almost finished before Noctis goes into defense mode, but this game needs to at least have Duskai 2.0's dodge canceling, or else transitioning from attacking to defending, which is the basic strategy of the game, will feel a bit unresponsive and possibly clunky like the pre-patch Episode Duskai, and sort of with the Platinum demo too. The AI of the Imperial soldiers from Trial of Titan is a little unintentionally unresponsive. I can't tell if the soldiers are Magitech robots, but even if they are, the AI is still unresponsive. Like, Noctis will land next to a group of soldiers and they just stand around watching and not doing anything. I understand that they're probably focused on Titan, but Noctis should at least be acknowledged because he's a threat to the guards as well. This doesn't necessarily mean he needs to be attacked by everyone, but there should at least be a response to his presence, like slowly backing away or something. Armiger recharges by landing hits on enemies, which is really smart because it's an incentive to play proactively. It looks like it recharges slowly on its own, but faster when you're dealing damage. I like that. The recharge is sort of similar to Devil May Cry's Devil Trigger ability, which reminds me that there should be a penalty like consuming some of Armiger's meter for deactivating Armiger before it runs out, so the higher level players aren't tediously trying to conserve it by only activating it before hitting an enemy, then deactivating it, or just interrupting your attack animations but not breaking the combo when activating Armiger would be enough of a penalty also. Hopefully the Phantom Swords accessible while using Armiger are not overpowered, or at least restrict access to the overpowered stuff until the end of the game so we don't get that Armiger Warp Strike spam from Episode Duskai at the beginning of the game. I like how you can command party members to perform specific actions, which seems to usually be special abilities or magic. Item usage seems like it should fit in there as well. The cost of a command is a section of a constantly recharging meter that is exclusively for party commands, which recharges at a good rate. I'm not convinced that a meter on the HUD is necessary to indicate when and how many commands you can give to allies, though. At the moment there are 4 different meters on the HUD, which is a little cluttered and not the easiest to keep an eye on, like I frequently forget about Armiger's meter. I like what they've done with the stamina meter, how it pops up when stamina is being spent. Ideally I'd want the regular HUD to only have 3 meters on it, and have the other stuff displayed differently, like potentially with a cooldown time. Or an easy fix is to only have the command meter pop up when you hit the left bumper and are looking at the commands. That should clean it up. Anyway, the commands add another level of strategy and variety to the combat. They could potentially act as 4 more slots for magic and weapons, because you can command an ally to use them for you. Also, from a storytelling perspective, just by other party members helping you out in combat gives you a little more sympathy for them, and they seem a little more endearing, and this is really natural to implement since combat is a big part of the game. It's unclear how much control over their actions you'll have. Like, I don't know how their targets are picked. In the footage, your allies seem to attack enemies close to Noctis. It would also make sense to target the enemies Noctis is locked onto. Based on the footage, after inputting a command, the camera centers on your ally as they take action, and a button prompt will appear if Noctis is in close enough proximity to that ally. I resist having the camera move off of Noctis when engaged in combat because he becomes invincible and immobile during that time, and the enemies still attack him, so things can look awkward if you watch Noctis. The enemies around Noctis should at least have their aggression turned down so they're only like circling him or distancing themselves. I have yet to see a party member dealt damage by an enemy attack while executing a command. Prompto does take a bit of recoil damage from his kickback blast, but that's not inflicted by an enemy. To be fair, it doesn't take that long for the command to be executed, and it could make sense for the enemies not to be able to respond to an attack, but take a look at this. Prompto walks right past this soldier that isn't doing anything, and the Magitech soldier he attacks doesn't even look at him. If that was Noctis, the soldier probably would have pistol whipped him. What my point is that these commands are too powerful at the moment and spammable. It's pretty much a guaranteed hit, where the party member is invincible and they deal too much damage for that. Allowing enemies to attack and deal damage to them should balance it out. My other point is that the camera shouldn't leave Noctis when he's engaged in combat because it's disruptive. I understand that Final Fantasy is all about the cinematics, so if Noctis isn't attacking, then it would work to center the camera on the ally, and of course lower the aggression of the enemies around Noctis so they aren't jumping around idiotically. Commands can sometimes lead to link attacks, which look like they pop up somewhat spontaneously if another party member is doing something near you in combat. Then an opportunity for synergy is seized, and the link attack happens. I like how link attacks are implemented. It's a benefit of fighting close by your allies, and it's not disruptive since there's no camera change. It's just one of your friends jumps in to help you out and powers up the next strike through a little scripted attack. Since you don't have direct control over when link attacks occur, I like that there's no button prompt or punishment for messing up timing. This game definitely wants you fighting as a group because of incentives like these opportunities for synergy, but also the secondary health bar, that light gray one, depletes while Noctis is injured and hobbling around, so the faster a party member can aid you, the more HP you'll get back, and a party member is more likely to quickly aid you if you're close by. The other big mechanic that's interesting, but there still is a lot of mystery surrounding it, is how magic works. You have a set amount of uses for each spell, and each spell has a cooldown period, which probably is a different duration for each spell, and it would be interesting if that duration shortened as Noctis's magic stat increases. I don't know how Noctis's uses of the magic are replenished, though. I'm assuming by using ethers, or resting, or camping. Nothing unconventional. I also don't know how the amount of uses for a spell is dictated, probably by some stat that progresses as you level up, and the amount can probably be increased through synthesis. And speaking of synthesis, you can craft and customize the magic of your party members. I'm not the biggest fan of crafting systems because they can get tedious and boring and have too much stuff to sift through, and that gets convoluted and boring to me. But what they displayed at the stage presentation looks pretty simple to use. They're just 4 slots to put magic and items in, which is manageable. It kind of reminds me of how in Final Fantasy Type 0 you could level magic separately and optimize stuff like the casting cost or damage. In order to craft your magic, you need to go around the open world absorbing power from different types of elemental crystals. I can't tell exactly what the power is used for because the picture-in-a-picture of Tabata is covering what's going on in the footage of magic crafting, and I don't know where that footage would be without Tabata in it. But we can discount the possibility that the power from the crystal replenishes uses of a spell because the numbers that appear while Noctis is absorbing would be way too many uses for the level he's at. I mean, Noctis in the Trial of Titan was at a higher level and only had like 30 uses of Blizzard. Those numbers in the field don't correlate with that. But at least I can say is that the absorbed power from the crystals is important for synthesizing magic. I know that's a little vague, but as we can see from the gauge in the field, this number 69 out of 99 is probably the same as this 69. Now, at the bottom of the screen, the fire magic is being boosted, so I don't know if what you're collecting is like a currency and you spend that to power up the spell, but then why would there be a gauge out of 99? Why would you need to collect 99 if you can get the benefit by spending it freely? So, how the power of his fire magic is being boosted remains a mystery to me. But it's a really great idea to be able to combine multiple magic spells into one because you only have 4 slots for weapons and magic, so making a multi-purpose magic is important for conserving space. Hopefully absorbing energy from crystals in the wilderness isn't tedious or a chore. There are probably ways to compensate for weak magic, so it's probably not necessary to go through the whole game. Anyway, each crystal seems to fill a good amount of the gauge, and you can probably return to the crystal because their logo on the minimap doesn't disappear, it only darkens. The magic looks great though. I love how it visually affects the environment and the characters, and it deals some damage to the characters as well. Apparently magic is enhanced or weakened by the weather. The environment does that as well as far as I've seen, like a fire spell catches the grass on fire and that burning area deals damage to the stuff in it. I hope that interaction with the environment extends to getting a damage boost by hitting an enemy who's standing in a puddle of water with a thunder spell. Another thing that I like is that your HP regenerates slowly. It seems that there's a set ratio for your character's HP to regenerate at compared to the total amount of HP. A little issue I have is that with a high number of total HP, the numbers increase rapidly, and that's a little distracting and hard to read. Numbers aren't even necessary to display on the HUD. The meter isn't accurate enough of an indicator. You can just look at the character's stats from the pause menu if you want to see a numerical value. It doesn't need to be on the HUD. Another minor complaint is that the gas for the regalia depletes too quickly. I don't know how far gas stations are from each other or how much you'll be driving for extended periods of time, but it looks like it drains too quickly relative to the distance traveled. And the noticeably depleting gas is distracting from just enjoying the scenery and the ride. Cooking was another system shown off. It's pretty much the same as in episode Duskai, but here you're allowed to choose the meals, which is great. It's simple, there's some depth, and not integral to the gameplay, but there are clear incentives to cook. The open world looks pretty good. In order for it not to become boring, there needs to be a substantial amount of interaction with the environment that has an impact on gameplay, or else it just becomes open space. There seems to be a good amount of stuff like the magic crystals and cooking ingredients to collect in the fields of the open world. There are a reasonable amount of different types of encounters, which also keeps things interesting, particularly if the combat system is good, which also seems to be taken care of here. There's variety in the environments and terrain, which you can traverse differently by walking or running or riding a chocobo or driving and flying in the regalia. The day-night cycle also creates a little more of an adventurous atmosphere, because it's like time passing. The day-night cycle also has a direct impact on the world, because there's a different variety of more challenging monsters that come out at night, and that helps keep the open world fresh. Something that I haven't seen yet is friendly NPCs roaming around in the open world. I've seen NPCs on the roadside, but putting other travelers or adventurers or thieves out there makes the world feel more occupied, and is more interactions to keep the player engaged. They've also got mini-games like fishing and Justice Monsters 5 to allow the player even more interaction with the environment. One thing that the Final Fantasy series has done well in the past is the variety of optional dungeons and towns to visit. I presume that stuff like that will be sprinkled throughout the open world because that's a strength of the series, you know? Like, you're progressing through the story and then you stop to venture into a dungeon and fight a guardian of a sacred sword, or find some powerful magic, or meet an interesting new character. So yeah, I'm anticipating dungeons and little towns to discover in the open worlds, and they need to have quality rewards to warrant visiting them, though. Before I end, I want to part with a couple nitpicky minor complaints. I want an explanation why you can accept hunts from a cashier at a diner. I mean, you probably aren't hunting their rats in the kitchen. A reasonable explanation could be that the local wilderness management is using vendors to raise awareness of troublesome beasts in the area, and will reimburse vendors, plus a little extra, for rewarding hunters that succeed in dealing with the beasts. If they drop an explanation like that in there, then that contrivance will stop bothering me. And also, why is defend changed to phase? They do the same thing, but phase sounds like a dodge warp. Defend more accurately describes what holding down on the button does. But that's all I've got for now. After going through the footage thoroughly, this game seems to be getting a lot right. The director keeps saying that he thinks this game will meet and exceed people's expectations, which, you know, it kind of sounds like hot air, but I kind of am thinking that they've got something special here. Of course, my judgment is reserved until I've played through the final game, but I'm hoping that there isn't like a massive technical error or unfair system or unbalanced mechanics in here that they've got behind closed doors. I know that I didn't go over everything from the E3 conference, like I didn't talk about Alticia, and that's because I just saw a screenshot of that and it looks really cool. I just don't really want to spoil that for myself. I want to go into Alticia with a fresh perspective. You know, I know what to expect. I know that it's supposed to be based on Venice. That's all I need to know. And then I know I didn't talk about wait mode, and that's because I don't care. So, anyway, thanks for listening.